What's up, everyone, and welcome to this week's Cybersecurity Weekly, where we review the security events that happened in the last week. As always, I've broken the stories down in the timeline, and there is a list of the stories with time markers in the description below, so you, of course, can click on any of those time markers to jump around to any story that you want. If you find my work valuable, of course, I ask you to hit the like button and share this episode with anyone you know who can benefit from this information. Lastly, if you've not already, please also consider subscribing to my channel.
Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
We start off today with phishing. Aurora Stealer Malware is becoming a prominent threat. Aurora Stealer is an info-stealing malware that was first advertised on Russian-speaking underground forums in April 2022. Aurora was offered as a malware as a service by a threat actor known as Cheshire. It's a multi-purpose botnet with data stealing and remote access capabilities. Researchers at Sequoia identified 7, traffickers, teams on dark web forums that announced the availability of the Aurora Stealer in their arsenal, a circumstance that confirms the increased popularity of the malware among threat actors. In October and November 2022, researchers analyzed several hundred collected samples and identified dozens of active command and control servers. The experts also observed multiple infection chains leading to the deployment of Aurora Stealer. The attackers used methods to deliver the malware, including phishing websites masquerading as legitimate ones, YouTube videos, and fake free software catalog websites. These infection chains leveraged phishing pages impersonating download pages of legitimate software, including cryptocurrency wallets or remote access tools, and the 911 method making use of YouTube videos and SEO-poised fake cracked software download websites. Reads the analysis by the experts. The malware was also able to target 40 cryptocurrency wallets and applications like Telegram. Threat actors behind this malware also advertised this loader or its loader capabilities. The malicious code, in fact, is able to deploy a next stage payload using a PowerShell command. Aurora is another info-stealer targeting data from browsers, cryptocurrency wallets, local systems, and acting as a loader. Sold at a high price on marketplaces, collected data is of particular interest to cybercriminals, allowing them to carry out follow-up lucrative campaigns, including big game hunting operations, concluded the report. As multiple threat actors, including Traffers teams, added the malware to their arsenal, Aurora Stealer is becoming a prominent threat. An aggressive Black Basta Ransomware campaign targets US-based companies. Experts at the Cybersecurity Global SOC team have observed a surge in CakeBot infections as part of an ongoing aggressive CakeBot malware campaign that leads to Black Basta ransomware infections in the US. In the last 2 weeks, the experts observed attacks against more than 10 different US-based customers. Black Basta has been active since April 2022. Like other ransomware operations, it implements a double extortion attack model. Security researchers at Sentinel Labs recently shared details about Black Basta TDPs and assess it is highly likely the ransomware operation has ties with Fin7. In this latest campaign, the Black Basta ransomware gang is using CakeBot malware to create an initial point of entry and move laterally within an organization's network. CakeBot, also known as QBot or Pink Slipbot, is a banking Trojan primarily used to steal victims' financial data, including browser information, keystrokes, and credentials. Reads the report published by Cybereason. Once CakeBot has successfully infected an environment, the malware installs a backdoor, allowing the threat actor to drop additional malware, namely ransomware. The attack chain starts with a QBot infection. The operators use the post-exploitation tool Cobalt Strike to take over the machine and finally deploy the Black Basta ransomware. The attacks began with a spam or phishing email containing malicious URL links. The researchers noticed that once access to the network is obtained, the threat actor moves extremely fast. In some cases, observed by Cybereason, the threat actor obtained domain administrator privileges in less than 2 hours and moved to ransomware deployment in less than 12 hours. The threat actor was also spotted locking the victims out of the network by disabling DNS servers, making the recovery even more complex. Now, please note that you see that 12 hours for the deployment of ransomware does sound like a very fast time, but typically it takes a lot longer. They do a lot more recon, etc., and exfiltration of data. 12 hours is a very, very speedy process. In most of the attacks observed by the experts, the spear phishing email contains a malicious disk image file. Upon opening the file, QBot is executed. Then the malware connects to a remote server to retrieve the Cobalt Strike payload. Threat actors perform credential harvesting and lateral movement and use the gathered credentials to compromise as many endpoints as possible and deploy the Black Basta ransomware. Experts observe the attackers attackers that were looking for machines without a defense sensor in an attempt to deploy additional malicious tools without being detected. We now move on to patches. Google addressed the 8th Chrome Zero Day, and since then the 9th. This year, Google rolled out an emergency security update for the desktop version of Chrome web browser to address a new zero-day vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-4135 that is actively exploited. The CVE 2022-4135 vulnerability is a heap buffer overflow issue in GPU. The vulnerability was reported by Clément Lassigny of Google's Threat Analysis Group on November 22nd, 2022. I did an episode about this. As usual, Google did not share technical details about the vulnerability in order to allow users to update their Chrome installations. Google is aware that an exploit for CVE 2022-4135 exists in the wild. Reads the advisory published by Google. Access to bug details and links may be kept restricted until a majority of the users are updated with a fix. We will also retain restrictions if the bug exists in a third-party library that other projects similarly depend on, but haven't yet fixed. An attacker can exploit the heap buffer for overflow to potentially gain arbitrary code execution on systems running vulnerable versions of the browser. Google fixed the zero-day with the release of version 107.0.5304.1214 Mac and Linux, and then the 107.0.5304.121/122 for Windows, which the company plans to roll out over the coming days and weeks. The CVE 2022-4135 vulnerability is the 8th actively exploited Chrome zero-day addressed by Google this year. And Linux, and 107.0.5304.121/122 for Windows, which the company plans to roll out over the coming days and weeks, or has already rolled out. The CVE 2022-4135 vulnerability is the 8th actively exploited Chrome zero-day addressed by Google this year. Again, there is a 9th out there. Chrome users are recommended to update their installations as soon as possible to neutralize attacks attempting to exploit the zero-day. Microsoft released an out-of-bounds update to fix Kerberos auth issues. Microsoft released this out-of-bound update to address issues caused by a recent Windows security patch that causes Kerberos authentication problems. Microsoft Patch Tuesday security updates for November 2022 addressed a privilege escalation vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-37966 that impacts Windows Server. An attacker can trigger this flaw to gain administrator privileges on vulnerable systems. An authenticated attacker could conduct an attack that could leverage cryptographic protocol vulnerabilities in RFC 4757, Kerberos encryption type RC4 HMAC MD5, and MSPAC, or Privilege Attribute Certificate Data Structure Specification, to bypass security features in a Windows Active Directory environment. Reads the advisory published by Microsoft. After the release of the Patch Tuesday security updates, users started reporting issues related to the Kerberos authentication. The IT giant investigated the reports and developed an out-of-band update to fix the problems. There is a known issue documented in the security updates that address this vulnerability, where Kerberos authentication might fail for users or computers or services and GMSA accounts when serviced by Windows domain controllers that have installed Windows security updates released on November 8th, 2022. As an update been released that addresses this known issue? Continues the advisory. Yes, the issue is addressed by an out-of-band update released to Microsoft Update Catalog on and after November 17th, 2022. Customers who have not already installed the security updates released on November 8th, 2022 should install the out-of-band updates instead. Customers who have already installed the November 8th, 2022 Windows security updates and who are experiencing issues should install the out-of-band update. So basically, everybody should install the out-of-band updates. The IT giant recommends customers who have yet to install the security updates, lost my clicker, released on November 8th, 2022 to only install the out-of-band updates. Customers who have already installed the Patch Tuesday security, blah, 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 basically saying the same thing over and over again, that install the out-of-band updates is the end point. We now move on to attacks, vulnerabilities, and updates. There's a flaw in some Acer laptops that are used to bypass security features. ESET researchers announced in a series of tweets the discovery of a vulnerability impacting Acer laptops. The issue can allow an attacker to deactivate UEFI secure boot. The experts explained that the flaw, tracked to CVE 2022-4020, is similar to the Lenovo vulnerabilities the company disclosed earlier this month. Same as in Lenovo case, an attacker can trigger the issue to deactivate the UEFI secure boot by creating NVRAM variable directly from the operating system. CVE 2022-4020 is found in the DXE driver HQSW-SMI DXE, which checks for the boot order secure boot disable NVRAM variable. Notice the same name is in the case of Lenovo CVE 2022-3431. If the variable exists, the driver disables secure boot. Then there's some Twitter picture. Now, the Secure Boot is a security feature of the latest Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, which is UEFI 2.3.1, designed to detect tampering with bootloaders, key operating system files, and unauthorized option ROMs by validating their digital signatures. Detections are blocked from running before they can attack or infect the system specification. An attacker that is able to bypass the secure boot could bypass any security measure running on the machine and achieve persistence even in case the operating system is reinstalled. The CVE 2022-4020 impacts certain versions of Acer Aspire A315-22 from Acer. The vulnerability resides in the HQ SW SMI DXE driver on these consumer Acer notebook devices. Similar to the Lenovo issue, an attacker with elevated privileges can exploit the bug to modify UEFI secure boot settings by modifying an NVRAM variable. The DXE driver boot order DXE simply disables UEFI secure boot if NVRAM variables boot order secure boot disable exists. ESET explained that the flaws affect only 5 devices: Acer A315-22/22G, A115-21, and an Extensa EX215-21/21G. According to Acer, an update should be distributed as a critical Windows update. Alternatively, the updated BIOS version can be downloaded from Acer. 5 devices are affected. Again, we have that list already. Experts found a vulnerability in AWS AppSync. Amazon Web Services has addressed a cross-tenant confused deputy problem in its platform that could have allowed threat actors to gain unauthorized access to resources. The problem was reported to the company by researchers from Datadog on September 1st, 2022, and the bug was resolved on September 6th. A confused deputy problem occurs when an entity that doesn't have permission to perform an action can coerce a more privileged entity to perform the action. AWS provides tools to protect an account if the owner provides third parties, known as cross-account, or other AWS services, known as cross-service, access to resources in your account. The issue is related to the AppSync service in AWS that allows developers to quickly create GraphQL and pub/sub APIs. We have identified a cross-tenant vulnerability in Amazon Web Services, or known as AWS, that exploits AWS AppSync. Reads a report published by Datadog. This attack abuses the AppSync service to assume IAM roles in other AWS accounts, which allows an attacker to pivot into a victim organization and access resources in those accounts. Amazon investigated the potential exploitation of the issue in attacks in the wild and determined that no customers were affected. A security researcher recently disclosed a case sensitivity parsing issue within AWS AppSync, which could potentially be used to bypass services cross-account role usage validations and take action as a service account customer accounts. Reads the advisory published by Amazon. No customers were affected by this issue and no customer action is required. AWS moved immediately to correct this issue when it was reported. Analysis of logs going back to the launch of the service has been conducted, and we have conclusively determined that the only activity associated with this issue was between accounts owned by the researcher. No other customer accounts were impacted. In the attack scenario, a less privileged entity, the attacker, can force a privileged entity, or service AppSync, to perform some action on its behalf. The experts pointed out that to authorize the actions AppSync will perform, the developer creates a role, or AppSync can automatically create it on their behalf, with the required IAM permissions. The created role will have a trust policy that allows the AppSync service to assume the role. Using the S3 example, if a developer was building that API, they would create a role with the S3 permissions. They need to allow AppSync to assume that role. When that GraphQL API is called, AppSync will assume the role, perform the AWS API call, and interpret the results. The experts pointed out that AWS does have safeguards in place to prevent AppSync from assuming arbitrary roles by validating the role's Amazon resource name, or ARN. The check could be simply eluded by passing the service role ARN parameter in a lowercase. An attacker can exploit the issue to provide the identifier of a role for a different AWS account. Android keyboard apps with 2 million downloads can remotely hack your device. Researchers at the Synapse Cybersecurity Research Center, or CERC, warn of 3 Android keyboard apps with cumulatively 2 million installs that are affected by multiple flaws. CVE 2022-45477, CVE 2022-4578, CVE 2022-45479, 45480, 45481, 45482, 45883. that can be exploited by attackers to compromise a mobile phone keyboard and mouse apps, connect to a server on a desktop or laptop computer, and transmit mouse and keyboard events to a remote server. These three Android apps, Lazy Mouse, PC Board, and Telepad, are keyboard apps available on the official Google Play Store and are used as remote keyboard and mouse. CERC experts warn of a weak or missing authorization, and insecure communication vulnerabilities in the three apps. An exploit of the authentication and authorization vulnerabilities could allow remote unauthenticated attackers to execute arbitrary commands. Similarly, an exploit of the insecure communication vulnerability exposes the user's keystrokes, including sensitive information such as usernames and passwords. Recent analysis published by CERC. Mouse and keyboard applications use a variety of network protocols to exchange mouse and keystroke instructions. Although the vulnerabilities are all related to the authentication, authorization, and transmission implementations, each application's failure mechanism is different. The CERC found vulnerabilities that enable authentication bypasses and remote code execution in three applications, but did not find a single method of exploitation that applies to all three. CVE 2022-45477 Telepad allows remote unauthenticated users to send instructions to the server to execute arbitrary code without any previous authorization or authentication. CVE 2022-4579 PC Keyboard allows remote unauthenticated users to send instructions to the server to execute arbitrary code without any previous authorization or authentication. CVE 2022-4581, The default configuration of Lazy Mouse does not require a password, allowing remote unauthenticated users to execute arbitrary code with no prior authorization or authentication. Then the CVE 2022-45482, the Lazy Mouse server enforces weak password requirements and doesn't implement rate limiting, allowing remote unauthenticated users to easily and quickly brute force the PIN and execute arbitrary commands. Vulnerabilities were initially disclosed on August 13, 2022, and CERC published the advisory because they have yet to receive a response from the developer teams behind these apps. Threat actors exploit discontinued BOA web servers to target critical infrastructure. Microsoft experts believe that threat actors behind a malicious campaign aimed at Indian critical infrastructure earlier this year have exploited security flaws in a now discontinued web server called BOA. The BOA web server is widely used across a variety of devices, including IoT devices, and is often used to access settings and management consoles as well as sign-in screens. The experts pointed out that BOA has been discontinued since 2005. Researchers at Recorded Future observed several intrusion attempts on Indian critical infrastructure since 2020 and shared IOCs related to this campaign. Microsoft experts analyzed these IOCs and discovered that BOA servers were running on the IP addresses on the list of IOCs. They also explained that the electrical grid attack targeted exposed IoT devices running BOA. Microsoft also discovered that half of the IP addresses in the list published by Recorded Future returned suspicious HTTP response headers, which might be associated with the active deployment of a malicious tool identified by Recorded Future. Investigating the headers further indicated that over 10% of all active IP addresses returned the headers were related to critical industries, such as the petroleum industry and associated fleet services, with many of the IP addresses associated to IoT devices, such as routers, with unpatched critical vulnerabilities, highlighting an accessible attack vector for malware operators. RISI report published by Recorded Future. Most of the suspicious HTTP response headers were returned over a short time frame of several days, leading researchers to believe they may be associated with intrusion and malicious activity on networks. Microsoft experts explain that despite BOA being discontinued in 2005, many vendors across a variety of IoT devices and popular software development kits continue to use it. The researchers identified over 1 million internet-exposed BOA server components around the world over the span of a week. We assess the vulnerable component to be the BOA web server, which is often used to access settings and management consoles and sign-in screens and devices, reads the report published by Microsoft. Without developers managing the BOA web server, its known vulnerabilities could allow attackers to silently gain access to networks by collecting information from files. Moreover, those affected may be unaware that their devices run services using the discontinued BOA web server and that firmware updates and downstream patches do not address its known vulnerabilities. BOA is known to be affected by multiple flaws, including CVE 2017-9833 and CVE 2021-33558, which can allow unauthenticated attackers to read arbitrary files, obtain sensitive information, and gain remote code execution. There's a researcher that warned Cisco secure email gateways can easily be circumvented. An anonymous researcher publicly disclosed a series of techniques to bypass some of the filters in Cisco secure email gateway appliance and deliver malware using specially crafted emails. The researcher pointed out that the attack complexity is low. It also added that working exploits have already been published by a third party. The expert disclosed the technique within a coordinated disclosure procedure. This report is being published within a coordinated disclosure procedure, according to the disclosure. The researcher has been in contact with the vendor but not received a satisfactory response within a given time frame, wrote the researcher on the full disclosure mailing list. As the attack complexity is low and exploits have already been published by a third party, there must be no further delay in making the threads publicly known. The researchers explained that Cisco secure email gateways can be circumvented by a remote attacker that leverages error tolerance and different MIME decoding capabilities of email clients. The message disclosed by the researcher could allow attackers to bypass Cisco secure email gateway. They work against several email clients such as Outlook, Thunderbird, Mutt, and Vivaldi. Cisco published a bug report warning of an issue in the Sophos and McAfee scanning engines of Cisco Secure Email Gateway that could allow an unauthenticated remote attacker to bypass specific filtering features. The issue is due to improper identification of potentially malicious emails or attachments. An attacker could exploit this issue by sending a malicious email with malformed content type headers or MIME types through an affected device, reads the alert. An exploit could allow the attacker to bypass default anti-malware filtering features based on the affected scanning engines and successfully deliver malicious messages to the end clients. The researchers explained that the code employing the attack methods and many similar techniques to manipulate MIME encoding are implemented in an open source toolkit for generating and testing bad MIME that is available on GitHub, known for many years and have been found in products of several vendors. Devices from Dell, Hewlett-Packard, and Lenovo used outdated OpenSSL versions. Binarily, researchers discovered that devices from Dell, HP, and Lenovo are still using outdated versions of the OpenSSL cryptographic library. The OpenSSL software library allows secure communications over computer networks against eavesdropping or need to identify the party at the other end. OpenSSL contains an open source implementation of the secure sockets layer and transport layer security protocols. The researchers discovered the issue by analyzing firmware images used by devices from the aforementioned manufacturers. The experts analyzed one of the core frameworks, EDKII, used as a part of any UEFI firmware which has its own submodule and wrapped over the OpenSSL library in the crypto package component. EDK2 is a modern, feature-rich cross-platform firmware development environment for the UEFI and UEFI platform initialization, or PI, specifications. The main EDK2 repository is hosted on GitHub and is frequently updated. The experts first analyzed the Lenovo ThinkPad enterprise devices and discovered that they used different versions of OpenSSL in the firmware image. Lenovo ThinkPad enterprise devices use 3 different versions of OpenSSL: 0.9, 0.8, 1.0.0a, and 1.0.2j. The most recent OpenSSL version was released in 2018. Many of the security-related firmware modules contain significantly outdated versions of OpenSSL. Some of them, like Infineon TPM Update DXE, contain code known to be vulnerable for at least 8 years, reads the report published by Binarily. The Infineon TPM Update DXE module is responsible for updating the firmware of Trusted Platform module on the Infineon chip. This clearly indicates the supply chain problem with third-party dependencies when it looks like these dependencies never received an update, even for critical security issues. One of the firmware modules named Infineon TPM Update DXE uses the OpenSSL version 0.9.8z-B that was released on August 4th, 2014. The researchers discovered that most recent OpenSSL version is used by Lenovo enterprise devices and dates back to the summer of 2021. There was an image with reports for each vendor, all the versions of OpenSSL detected by the Binarily platform in the wild. The experts pointed out that the same device firmware code often rely on different versions of OpenSSL. The reason for this design choice is that the supply chain of third-party code depends on their own codebase, which is often not available to device firmware developers. The researchers explain that this introduces an extra layer of such supply chain complexity. Most of the OpenSSL dependencies are linked statically as libraries to specific firmware modules that create compile time dependencies, which are hard to identify without deep code analysis capabilities, continue to report. Historically, the problem within third-party code dependencies is not an easy issue to solve at the compiled code level. The experts noticed that the devices from Dell Lenovo relied on version 0.9.8i or L that dates back to 2009. Ducktail information stealer continues to evolve. In late July 2022, researchers from WithSecure, formerly F-Secure business, discovered an ongoing operation named Ducktail that was targeting individuals and organizations that operate on Facebook's business and ads platform. Experts attribute the campaign to a Vietnamese financially motivated threat actor, which is suspected to be active since 2018. The threat actors target individuals and employees that may have access to a Facebook business account. They use an information stealer malware that steals browser cookies and abuses authenticated Facebook sessions to steal information from the victim's Facebook account. The end goal is to hijack Facebook business accounts managed by the victims. The threat actors target individuals with managerial, digital marketing, digital media, and human resources roles in companies. The attackers connected the victims through LinkedIn. Connect with the victims through LinkedIn. Some of the samples observed by the experts have been hosted on file or cloud hosting services such as Dropbox, iCloud, Mediafire. After a short pause, the Ducktail campaign returned with slight changes in its TTPs. Starting on September 6, 2022, the researchers detected new samples in the wild with a new variant that uses the .NET 7 native AOT feature, which allows binaries to be compiled natively ahead of time from .NET code. The format for these binaries is different from the one used by traditional .NET assemblies. Native AOT offers similar benefits to the .NET single file feature that previous Ducktail variants used for compilation, especially because they can be compiled as a framework-independent binary that doesn't require .NET runtime to be installed on the victim's machine, reads the report published by WithSecure. Between the 2nd and 4th of October 2022, the security firm discovered new Ducktail samples being submitted to VirusTool from Vietnam. The samples contained a mixture of old and new Ducktail variant code bases compiled as self-contained .NET Core 3 Windows binaries, which suggests that the group is shifting to self-contained applications. On October 5th, the operators started distributing Ducktail malware to victims as self-contained .NET Core Windows binaries, abandoning native AOT and back to using self-contained .NET binaries. The analysis of variants written in .NET Core 3 revealed the presence of unused anti-analysis functions that were copied from GitHub repository. This is yet another indication of the threat actors' continuous efforts to evade analysis and detection mechanisms. WithSecure observed several multi-stage subvariants of Ducktail that are used to deliver the final payload. The researchers highlighted that this is the primary information stealer malware in all cases. Emotet is back and delivers payloads like IcedID and Bumblebee. Proofpoint researchers warned of the return of the Emotet malware. In early November, the experts observed a high-volume mall spam campaign delivering payloads like IcedID and Bumblebee. The Emotet banking Trojan has been active at least since 2014. The botnet is operated by a threat actor tracked as TA542. The infamous banking Trojan was also used to deliver other malicious codes such as TrickBot and QBot Trojans, or ransomware such as Conti, Prolock, Ryuk, and eGregor. In April, the operators of the infamous Emotet botnet started testing new attack techniques in response to Microsoft's move to disable Visual Basic for applications macros by default. In June, Proofpoint experts spotted a new variant of the Emotet bot that uses a new module to steal credit card information stored in the Chrome web browser. Over time, Emotet operators have enhanced their attack chain by employing multiple attack vectors to remain under the radar. Threat actors were spotted distributing hundreds of thousands of emails per day. This activity suggests Emotet is returning to its full functionality, acting as a delivery network for major malware families. The experts noticed multiple changes to the bot and its payloads, and the operators introduced changes to the malware modules, loader, and packer. The changes observed by Proofpoint are the volume of emails that Emotet sending bots attempt to deliver each day is in the hundreds of thousands. So I think some information was missed there. Now, the numbers are comparable to historical averages. Hence, it does not appear that the Emotet botnet lost any significant spamming capability during the inactive period. Reads the report published by Proofpoint. The wave of attacks observed by the security firm primarily targeted the US, the UK, Japan, Germany, Italy, France, Spain, Mexico, and Brazil. The emails observed in recent attacks typically used a weaponized Excel attachment or a password-protected zip attachment containing an Excel file inside. The Excel files contain XL4 macros that download the Emotet payload from several, typically 4, built-in URLs. The novelty of the Excel files used in recent campaigns is that they contain instructions for recipients to copy the file to a Microsoft Office template location and run it from there instead. This location is trusted, which means that opening a document located in this folder will not display any warnings. However, while moving a file to a template location, the operating system asks users to confirm that administrative permissions are required to do such a move, observe the experts. It remains unclear how effective this technique is. While there is no longer a need for users to enable macros with an extra click, there is instead a need to perform a file move, acknowledge the dialog, and the user must have administrative privileges. ENC Security, the encryption provider for Sony and Lexar, leaked sensitive data for over a year. The original post was on Cyber News. When you buy a Sony, Lexar, or SanDisk USB key or any other storage device, it comes with an encryption solution to keep your data safe. The software is developed by the third-party vendor ENC Security. Netherlands-based company with 12 million users worldwide provides military-grade data protection solutions with its popular Data Vault encryption software. As it turns out, ENC Security had been leaking its configuration and certificate files for more than a year, the Cyber News research team discovered. The data that was leaking for over a year is nothing less than a gold mine for threat actors, Cyber News researcher Martinez Vareikis said. The company said a misconfiguration by a third-party supplier caused the issue and fixed it immediately upon notification. The data inside the leaky server included simple mail transfer protocol credentials for sales channels, the single payment platforms, AIDN keys, email marketing companies, MailChimp API keys, licensing payment API keys, HMAC message authentication codes, and public and private keys, and stored in .pem format. The data was accessible from 27th of May 2021 up until the 9th of November 2022. The server was closed after Cyber News disclosed the vulnerability to ENC Security. According to Vareikis, the discovery is worrying since bad actors could exploit the aforementioned data for a variety of cyber attacks, from phishing to ransomware. For example, sales communication channels could be used to phish clients by sending them fake invoices or spreading malware via trusted email addresses. MailChimp API keys could add even more value for the malicious actors' interest in phishing campaigns, as it allows them to send massive marketing campaigns and collect leads. Having a client list and the ability to use real email for phishing campaigns is nothing less than a goldmine for threat actors, Vareikis explained. Ransomware operators exploit .pem files. The keys left inside could result in unauthorized access or even a server takeover. The repercussions of such a takeover could be devastating. Threat actors might switch the download file with an infected one. Having clients such as SanDisk, Sony, Lexar, and more promoting Trustpilot reviewers complain being forced into using this software when purchasing thumb drives, your infected files would produce one of the biggest ransomware campaigns yet, Vareikis explained. Payment API keys could expose sensitive client information to the public. ENC Security said it had taken swift action after analyzing the issue discovered by the Cyber News research team. The vulnerability concerned a misconfiguration by a third-party supplier, ENC Security told Cyber News. Now the issue is resolved. Google provides rules to detect tens of cracked versions of Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike is a paid penetration testing product that allows an attacker to deploy an agent named Beacon on the victim machine. The Beacon includes a wealth of functionality for the attacker, including, but not limited to, command execution, key logging, file transfer, SOX proxying, privilege escalation, Mimikatz, port scanning, and lateral movement. Google Cloud researchers announced to have discovered 34 different Cobalt Strike hacked release versions with a total of 275 unique jar files across these versions. Google Cloud threat intelligence researchers developed a set of Yara rules to detect hack variants in the wild with a high degree of accuracy. The researchers noticed that each Cobalt Strike version contains approximately 10 to 100 attack template binaries. The experts were able to locate versions of the Cobalt Strike jar file starting with version 1.44, which was released in 2012, up to the latest version at the time of publishing the analysis, Cobalt Strike 4.7. The researchers cataloged the stagers, templates, and beacons, including the XOR encodings used by Cobalt Strike since version 1.44, GCTI noticed that the cracked versions of the post-exploitation tool used in the attack in the wild are not the latest versions from the vendor Fortra, but are typically at least one release version behind. For this reason, Google researchers focused on these versions. We focused on these versions by crafting hundreds of unique signatures that we integrated as a collection of community signatures available in VirusTotal, states the report published by Google. We also released these signatures as open source to cybersecurity vendors who are interested in deploying them within their own products, continuing our commitment to improving open source security across the industry. The activity conducted by Google aims at improving the detection of malicious activities involving hacked versions of the tool. It is an important work that did not impact legitimate versions of the tools used by penetration testing and red teams. We wanted to enable better detection of actions done by bad actors, and we needed a surgical approach to exercise the bad versions while leaving the legitimate ones untouched. This required detecting the exact version of the Cobalt Strike component. Concludes the post. By targeting only the non-current versions of the components, we can leave the most recent versions alone, the version that paying customers are using. Threat actors are offering access to corporate networks via unauthorized Fortinet VPN access. Researchers at Cyble have observed initial access brokers selling access to enterprise networks likely compromised via a recently patched critical flaw tracked to CB 2022-40684 in Fortinet products. In early October, Fortinet addressed the critical authentication bypass flaw tracked to CVE 2022-40684 that impacted FortiGate firewalls and FortiProxy web proxies. The company explained that an attacker can exploit the vulnerability to log into vulnerable devices. An authentication bypass using an alternate path or channel, CWE88, in FortiOS and FortiProxy may allow an unauthenticated attacker to perform operations on the administrator interface via specially crafted HTTP and HTTPS requests, reads the customer support bulletin issued by the company. The company urged customers to address this critical vulnerability immediately due to the risk of remote exploitation of the flaw. The vulnerability impacts FortiOS versions from 7.0.0 to 7.0.6 and from 7.2.0 to 7.2.1, and FortiProxy versions from 7.0.0 to 7.0.6 and 7.2. The cybersecurity firm addressed the flaw with the release of FortiOS and FortiProxy versions 7.0.7 and 7.2.2. The company also provides a workaround for those who cannot immediately deploy these security updates. Customers that are not able to upgrade their systems should restrict access to their devices to a specific set of IP addresses. On October 18th, Fortinet confirmed the critical authentication bypass vulnerability is being exploited in the wild. Fortinet is aware of an instance where this vulnerability was exploited and recommends immediately validating your systems against following indicator of compromise in device logs. User equals local process access continues the advisory. Now, a proof of concept exploit for code for the CVE 2022-40684 flaw has been released online. The public availability of the POC exploit code can fuel a wave of attacks targeting Fortinet devices. In October, the Shadow Server Foundation reported that more than 17,000 Fortinet devices exposed online were vulnerable to attacks exploiting the CVE 2022-40684 flaw, most of them in Germany and in the US. Now, Cyble researchers reported that more than 100,000 FortiGate firewalls accessible from the internet that may be targeted by threat actors if not patched yet. Threat actors might exploit the vulnerability to perform malicious activities such as, while during routine monitoring, researchers at Cyble observed, I guess the list is gone. During routine monitoring, researchers at Cyble observed a threat actor distributing multiple unauthorized Fortinet VPN access over one of the Russian cybercrime forums, reads the analysis published by Cyble. While analyzing the access, it was found that the attacker was attempting to add their own public key to the admin user's account. As per intelligence gathered from sources, the victim organizations were using outdated FortiOS. Hence, with high confidence, we conclude that the threat actor behind them, the sale exploited CVE 2022-40684. Experts claim that iPhone's analytics data is not anonymous. Researchers at software company MISC discovered that analytics data collected by iPhone include the Directory Services Identifier, which could allow identifying users. Apple collects both DSID and Apple ID, which means that it can use the former to identify the user and retrieve associated personal information, including full name, phone number, birth date, email, and address. Apple uses DSID to uniquely identify Apple ID accounts. DSID is associated with your name, email, and any data in your iCloud account. This is a screenshot, or there is a screenshot of an API call to iCloud and DSID. It can be clearly seen alongside a user's personal data, reads the tweet by MISC. Apple's analytics data include an ID called DSID. We were able to verify that DSID is the directory service identifier and ID that uniquely identifies an iCloud account, meaning Apple's analytics can personally identify you. That's according to the Twitter picture. Now, according to the experts, this behavior violates the privacy policy of the company that states that none of the collected information identifies you personally. Personal data is either not logged at all, is subject to privacy preserving techniques such as different privacy, or is removed from any reports before they're sent to Apple, states the policy. Knowing the DSID is like knowing your name. It's one-to-one to your identity, Tommy Misk, an app developer and security researcher, told Gizmodo. All these detailed analytics are going to be linked directly to you, and that's a problem because there's no way to switch it off. It is important to highlight that Misk researchers used a jailbroken iPhone running iOS 14.6 for the tests in order to be able to decrypt the traffic and determine which data are sent back to Apple. The expert also tested an iPhone running iOS 16, but security measures implemented by Apple could not allow them to jailbreak the device to inspect the traffic. Anyway, the experts argue that a jailbroken phone would send the same data as the latest iOS version. Earlier this month, Misk researchers also discovered that Apple collects analytics information even when the user switches off the iPhone setting Share iPhone Analytics. The recent changes that Apple has made to App Store ads should raise many privacy concerns. It seems that the App Store app on iOS 14.6 sends every tap you make in the app to Apple. This data is sent in one request. Data usage and personalized ads are off. Pro-Russian group Killnet claims responsibility for DDoS attack that has taken down the European Parliament site. The pro-Russia group of hacktivists Killnet claimed responsibility for the DDoS attack that today, or last week, took down the website of the European Parliament. The pro-Russia hacking group claims to have launched a DDoS attack against the European Parliament's Europol EN official website. The website is currently unreachable from the picture from the internet. Killnet officially recognizes the European Parliament as sponsors of homosexualism, states the group. The attack was launched immediately after lawmakers approved a resolution calling Moscow a state sponsor of terrorism. The European Parliament is under a sophisticated cyber attack. A pro-Kremlin group has claimed responsibility, said Parliament's President Roberta Metsola. Our IT experts are pushing back against it and protecting our systems. This after we proclaimed Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. The pro-Russian group Killnet claims responsibility for a DDoS attack that has taken down the European Parliament site. So the European Parliament site is under a sophisticated cyber attack. A pro-Kremlin group has claimed responsibility. Our IT experts are pushing back against it and protecting our systems. This after we proclaimed Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. When they give their response, according to the Director for Communications and spokesperson of the European Parliament, Jaume Dach, also confirmed the attack via Twitter of the @Europarl_EN website is currently impacted from outside due to high levels of external network traffic. This traffic is related to a DDoS attack, distributed denial of service event. EP teams are working to resolve this issue as quickly as possible. European Pirate Party MEP Mikulas Peksa reported that there are reports that the pro-Russian hacking group Killnet has claimed responsibility for that attack. If these reports are true, this is a massive attack on European democracy that will require further action, he added. MEPs call for the further international isolation of Russia due to its aggression to Ukraine and the ongoing escalation of the attacks against civilians. Parliament calls on the European Union to further isolate Russia internationally, including when it comes to Russia's membership of international organizations and bodies such as the United Nations Security Council. MEPs also want diplomatic ties with Russia to be reduced, EU contacts with official Russian representatives to be kept to the absolute minimum, and Russian state or affiliate institutions in the EU spreading propaganda around the world to be closed and banned. States the press release published by the EU Parliament. Against the backdrop of the Kremlin's escalating acts of terror against Ukrainian civilians, the resolution further calls on EU member states in the Council to swiftly complete its work on a ninth sanctions package against Moscow. LastPass discloses the second security breach this year. Password management solution LastPass disclosed a new security breach. The attackers had access to a third-party cloud storage service using information stolen in the August 2022 breach. The impacted cloud storage service is GoTo. It is currently shared by both LastPass and its affiliate. The company launched an investigation into the incident with the support of cybersecurity firm Mandiant and notified law enforcement. We have determined that an unauthorized party using information obtained in the August 22 incident was able to gain access to certain elements of our customers' information. Our customers' passwords remain safely encrypted due to LastPass Zero knowledge architecture, reads the notice of security incident published by the company. The company pointed out that customers' passwords were not compromised due to LastPass Zero knowledge architecture. In August, LastPass disclosed a security breach that threat actors had access to portions of the company development environment through a single compromised developer account, installed portions of the source code, and some proprietary technical information. At the time of the security breach, the company engaged a leading cybersecurity and forensics firm to investigate the incident. LastPass confirmed that the data breach did not compromise user master passwords. In an update published in September, the company revealed that the threat actors had access to its systems for 4 days during the August hack. Experts published proof-of-concept exploit code for macOS Sandbox Escape Flaw. Researcher Wajish Regu, of SecuRing published technical details and proof-of-concept code for a macOS Sandbox Escape vulnerability tracked to CV 2022-26696 with a CVSS score of 7.8. In a wrap-up published by Regula, the researcher observed that the problem is caused by a strange behavior he observed in a Sandbox macOS app that may launch an application that won't inherit the main app's Sandbox profile. According to ZDI, this vulnerability allows remote attackers to escape the sandbox on affected installations of Apple macOS. An attacker must first obtain the ability to execute low-privileged code on the target system in order to exploit this vulnerability. A sandbox process may be able to circumvent sandbox restrictions, reads the advisory published by Apple that addresses the flaw with improved environment sanitization. According to ZDI, a remote attacker can trigger the flaw to escape the sandbox on vulnerable Apple macOS installs. ZDI pointed out that an attacker can exploit the bug only if he has first obtain the ability to execute low-privileged code on the target system. This vulnerability allows remote attackers to escape the sandbox on affected installations of macOS. An attacker must first obtain the ability to execute low-privileged code, this is the third time we're saying this, on the target system in order to exploit this vulnerability, reads the report published by ZDI. The specific flaw exists within the handling of XPC messages in the launch services component. A crafted message can trigger execution of a privileged operation. An attacker can leverage this vulnerability to escalate privileges and, of course, execute arbitrary code in the content of the current user. The issue was reported to the vendor on December 22nd, can't be December 2021, and it was disclosed on August 15th, 2022. Regular focused his analysis on an Objective-C method of the terminal app. There it's listed there, and it will return yes when the OS install _environment variable was set, wrote the expert. So when terminal app starts, some of the environment variables were not cleared when returned yes. With a simple command injection, he was able to execute code within the terminal app context without any sandbox. The expert was able to weaponize the flaw by embedding the exploit in a Word document and load the Mythics JXA payload. Executing code within the terminal app context can be really dangerous, as it can also have some TCP permissions already granted, Regula explained. So Regu shared a video proof of concept that demonstrates how to weaponize Word documents to escape the sandbox and execute code within the terminal. North Korea ScarCruft APT used previously undetected Dolphin Backdoor against South Korea. Acer researchers discovered a previously undocumented backdoor called Dolphin that was employed by North Korea-linked ScarCruft Group, aka APT37, aka Reaper, aka Group 123, in attacks aimed at targets in South Korea. ScarCruft has been active since at least 2012. It made the headlines in early February 2018 when researchers revealed that the app group leveraged a zero-day vulnerability in Adobe Flash Player to deliver malware to South Korean users. Kaspersky first documented the operations of the group in 2016. Cyber attacks conducted by APT37 mainly targeted government, defense, military, and media organizations in South Korea. The Dolphin Backdoor supports a wide range of spying capabilities, including monitoring drives and portable devices and exfiltrating files of interest, keylogging and taking screenshots, and stealing credentials from browsers. This backdoor was employed against selected targets. It was delivered using less sophisticated malware. Dolphin abuses Google Drive cloud storage for command and control communication. During their investigation, they saw continued development of the backdoor and attempts by the malware authors to evade detection. A notable feature of earlier Dolphin versions they analyzed is the ability to modify the settings of victims' sign-in Google and Gmail accounts to lower their security, most likely to maintain access to victims' email inboxes, reads the post published by ESET. ESET research discovered Dolphin, a sophisticated backdoor extending the arsenal of the ScarCruft app group. Dolphin has a wide range of spying capabilities and is deployed on selected targets only. The Dolphin Backdoor was used as the final payload in a multi-stage watering hole attack in early 2021. The threat actors used the implant against a South Korean online newspaper. The app group also relied on an Internet Explorer exploit and used another backdoor named Blue Light, previously reported by security firms Volexity and Kaspersky. One of the most interesting features of earlier Dolphin versions analyzed by ESET is the ability to modify the settings of victims' sign-in Google and Gmail accounts to lower their security and avoid detection. It steals the existing cookie of the logged-in account from the browser and crafts requests that modify the settings, continues the report. The Dolphin Loader is composed of a Python script and shellcode, while the core backdoor is a Windows executable written in C++. Dolphin is another addition to ScarCruft's extensive arsenal of backdoors abusing cloud storage services, concludes the report, that also provides indicators of compromise, or IOCs, for the backdoor. One unusual capability found in prior versions of the backdoor is the ability to modify the settings of victims' Google and Gmail accounts to, again, lower their security, presumably in order to maintain account access for the threat actors. Exclusive! Quantum Locker lands in the cloud. During the latest weeks, the Belgian company Computerland shared insights with the European threat intelligence community about quantum TTPs adopted in recent weeks. The shared information revealed Quantum Gang used a particular modus operandi to target large enterprises relying on cloud services in the NACE region. The disclosed technical details about recent intrusions confirm the ability of the Quantum Locker Gang to conduct sabotage and ransomware attacks, even against companies heavily relying on cloud environments. For instance, TTPs employed in a recent attack include the complete takeover of company Microsoft Cloud Services through the compromise of the root account. Such action is particularly harrowing for victim companies. All the Microsoft services and users, including email services and regular users, would remain unusable until the vendor's response, which could last even days, depending on the reset request verification process. In addition, the insights on the fourth quarter 2022 attacks reported Quantum Locker operators are able to locate and delete all the victim Microsoft Azure's blob storages to achieve secondary backup annihilation and business data deletion. Even if cloud services could theoretically provide support for the restoration of old blobs and buckets, the recovery of permanently deleted data often requires days and might not even be available due to the provider's internal technical restrictions. The favorite initial targets of quantum operators during their recent activities in North Europe were IT administrators and networking staff. Through accessing their personal resources and shared Dropbox folders, the threat actors were able to gather sensitive administrative credentials to extend the attack on the cloud surface. Incident insights from the Belgian firm also confirm Quantum is coupling these new techniques even with more traditional ransomware delivery techniques, such as the modification of domain group policies, to distribute ransomware across an on-prem Windows machines, or the on-prem Windows machines and users' laptops, along with the abuse of the legitimate AnyDesk software as remote access control. Also, during the recent intrusions, quantum operators extensively altered the configuration of endpoint defense tools such as Microsoft Defender. In fact, threat actors were able to programmatically insert ad hoc exclusions to blind the onboard endpoint protection system without raising any shutdown warning. The Belgian firm also reports Quantum Locker's average encryption speed in real-world cloud hybrid scenario results around 13 megabits a second. An amount particularly slower than other ransomware families adopting intermittent encryption, extending the responder's windows of opportunity for in-time interception and containment. RansomBoggs Ransomware hit several Ukrainian entities. Researchers from ESET observed multiple attacks involving a new family of ransomware tracked as RansomBoggs Ransomware against Ukrainian organizations. The security firm first detected the attacks on November 21st and immediately alerted the CERT US. The ransomware is written in .NET, and experts noticed that deployment is similar to previous attacks attributed in the Russia-linked Sandworm app group. On November 21st, ESET researcher detected an alert and alerted CERT UA of a wave of ransomware they named RansomBoggs, deployed in multiple organizations, according to their tweet and their notification. Then there's a Twitter picture that's been active since 2000. It operates under the control of Unit 74455 of the Russian GRU's main Center for Special Technologies. The group is also the author of the NotPetya ransomware that hit hundreds of companies worldwide in June 2017, causing billions worth of damage. Now, of course, we're talking about Sandworm, which, again, this new one they're saying is an affiliate. So in April, Sandworm targeted energy facilities in Ukraine with a new strain of the Indestroyer ICS malware and a new version of the Caddy Wiper. The app hacking group is believed to have been behind numerous attacks this year, including an attack on Ukrainian energy infrastructure and the deployment of a persistent botnet called Cyclops Blink, dismantled by the U.S. government in April. From August 2022, Recorded Future researchers observed a rise in command and control infrastructure used by Sandworm, tracked by Ukraine CRTUA as UAC0113. In September 2022, Sandworm has been observed impersonating telecommunication providers to target Ukrainian entities with malware. The analysis of the RansomBoggs ransomware code revealed that the authors make multiple references to the Pixar movie Monsters, Inc. The ransom note, Sullivan decrypts your files.txt, shows the authors impersonating the main character of the movie, James B. Sullivan, and the executable file is also named Sullivan with .version.exe. Threat actors used a PowerShell script to spread the ransomware. The experts noticed that it is almost identical to the script detected in April during the Indestroyer 2 attacks against the energy sector. There are similarities with previous attacks conducted by Sandworm. A PowerShell script used to distribute the .NET ransomware from the domain controller is almost identical to the one seen last April during the Indestroyer 2 attacks against the energy sector. They were tracked by CertUA as PowerGap and was used to deploy the Wiper in April attacks against Ukrainian entities. As we said before, RansomBoggs encrypts files using AES-256 in CBC mode and appends the .chsch extension to the encrypted files. The key is then RSA encrypted and written to AES.bin. RansomExx Ransomware upgrades to Rust programming language. The operators of the RansomExx Ransomware, aka Defray77, aka RansomExx, have developed a new variant of their malware tracked as RansomExx2 that was ported into the Rust programming language. The move follows the decision of other ransomware gangs like Hive, Black Hat, and Luna of rewriting their ransomware into Rust programming language. The main reason to rewrite malware in Rust is to have a lower antivirus detection rate compared to malware written in more common languages. RansomExx2 was developed to target Linux operating systems, but experts believe that ransomware operators are already working on a Windows version. RansomExx operation has been active since 2018. The list of its victims includes government agencies, the computer manufacturer and distributor Gigabyte, and the Italian luxury brand Zegna, or Zegna. RansomExx is operated by DefrayX threat actor group Hive0091. The group also developed the Pixie Rat, Vater Loader, and Defray ransomware strains. The functionality implemented in RansomExx2 is very similar to previous RansomExx Linux variants. RansomExx2 has been completely rewritten using Rust, but otherwise its functionality is similar to its C++ predecessor. It requires a list of target directories to encrypt to be passed as command line parameters, and then encrypts files using AES-256 with RSA used to protect the encryption keys. Recent analysis published by IBM Security X-Force. The ransomware iterates through the specified directories, enumerating and encrypting files. The malware encrypts any file greater than or equal to 40 bytes and gives a new file extension to each file. The RansomExx2 encrypts files using the AES-256 algorithm. It drops a ransom note in each encrypted directory. RansomExx is yet another major ransomware family to switch to Rust in 2022, following similar effects like Hive and Black Hat. Concludes the report. While these latest changes by RansomExx may not represent a significant upgrade in functionality, the switch to Rust suggests a continued focus on the development and innovation of the ransomware by the group and continued attempts to evade detection. New Go-based Redigo malware targets Redis servers. Researchers from security firm Aquasec discovered a new Go-based malware that is used in a campaign targeting Redis servers. Threat actors are exploiting a critical vulnerability tracked to CVE 2022-0543 in Redis remote dictionary servers. Redis, again, remote dictionary server, is an open source in-memory database and cache. The CVE 2022-0543 flaw is a Lua sandbox escape flaw that impacts Debian and Debian-derived Linux distributions. The vulnerability, which was rated 10 out of 10 for severity, could be exploited by a remote attacker with the ability to execute arbitrary Lua scripts to possibly escape the Lua sandbox and execute arbitrary code on the underlying machine. Juniper Threat Labs researchers reported that the Moostic botnet has been observed targeting Redis servers exploiting the CVE 2022-0543 vulnerability. In March 2022, the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, added this flaw to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. The flaw has been fixed in February 2022, but threat actors continue to exploit it in attacks in the wild due to the public availability of a proof-of-concept exploit code. The attack chain starts with scans for the Redis server exposing port 6379 to the internet. Then, threat actors attempt to connect and run the following Redis commands. Attackers load the library file exp_lin lin.so and executes the exploit code for the above flaw. The file contains the implementation of the command system.exe, which allows the attackers to execute an arbitrary command and launch the attack. The first use of the command is activated to receive information about the CPU architecture. The second use of the command is done to download the newly discovered malware from the attacking server Redigo. After downloading the malware file, the attackers elevate the permissions of the file to execute it for malware investigation. Read below. Reads the analysis published by Aquasec. Threat actors simulate Redis communication over port 6379 to evade detection. Aquasec researchers believe that threat actors are using the Redigo malware to infect Redis and add them to a botnet used to launch denial of service attacks, run cryptocurrency miners, or steal data from these servers. The researchers also provided indicators of compromise for this threat. Google links 3 exploitation frameworks to a Spanish commercial spyware vendor, Variston. While tracking the activities of commercial spyware vendors, the threat analysis group spotted an exploitation framework likely linked to Variston IT, a Spanish firm. Officially, Variston claims to provide custom security solutions and custom patches for embedded systems. The experts reported that the framework includes exploits for ND vulnerabilities in Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft Defender. The company also provides a collection of tools to deploy a malicious payload to a target device. The vulnerabilities in Google, Microsoft, and Mozilla exploited by the company were fixed in 2021 and early 2022. TAG's research suggests that the above issues were utilized as 0 days in the wild by the surveillance vendor. TAG discovered the Heliconia framework after receiving an anonymous submission to the Chrome bug reporting program. The submitter reported 3 different exploitation frameworks, instructions, and an archive that contains source code. Their names in the bug reports are Heliconia Noise, Heliconia Soft, and Files. The researchers noticed the script in the source code that includes clues pointing to the possible developer of the exploitation frameworks, Variston IT. Although the vulnerabilities are now patched, we assess it is likely the exploits were used as 0 days before they were fixed, reads the analysis published by Google. The Heliconia Noise web framework is used to deploy a Chrome renderer render exploit followed by a Chrome sandbox escape and agent installation. The Chrome renderer exploit supports Chrome versions 90.0.443.330.72, which from April 2021 to 91.0.4472.106 up to June 2021, and trigger a V8 de-optimizer issue fixed in August 2021. The Heliconia Soft web framework exploits the CVE 2021 42298 remote code execution vulnerability in Microsoft Defender that was fixed in November 2021. The exploit is triggered when the victim downloads a specially crafted PDF file, which is scanned by Windows Defender. Heliconia Files framework delivers a Firefox exploit chain for Windows and Linux. It leverages CVE 2022-26485, remote code execution in Firefox. The bug was addressed by Mozilla in March 2022. TAG's research has shown the proliferation of commercial surveillance. The attacker's code listed GitHub's daily trending projects. Over 30,000 members have joined the Discord server created by the attacker so far, and this number continues to increase as this attack is ongoing. In mid-November, checkmarks uncovered an ongoing supply chain attack conducted by a threat actor. They tracked as WASP that is targeting Python developers. The WASP Stealer was spotted by checkmarks in mid-November when it was employed as part of an ongoing supply chain attack conducted by a threat actor targeting Python developers. As we just said, the malicious code is able to steal the victim's Discord accounts, passwords, crypto wallets, credit cards, and other sensitive data on the victim's PC. Stolen data have been sent back to the attacker through a hard-coded Discord webhook address. The threat actor is offering the WASP Stealer for $20, claiming it is undetectable and is heavily protected by some awesome obfuscation. The supply chain attacks seem to be financially motivated. The video includes an invite link to a Discord server or unfiltered space. Under the control of the attackers, the experts reported that 32,000 members have joined the Discord server before it was deleted. Once somebody has joined the server, the victims received a link to a GitHub repository hosting the info-stealing malware. The README file of the project also contains a link to a now-removed YouTube tutorial instructing users on how to run the installation script. After the Discord server unfiltered space was deleted, the attacker changed his GitHub repository name to 42world69/nitrogenerator and deleted old files on his repo and uploaded files to fit nitrogenerator. The campaign is linked to other malicious Python packages. The info-stealing malware has been embedded in various Python packages such as TikTok Filter API, PishTooler, PyOPCS, and PyDzings. Data from 5.4 million Twitter users was obtained from multiple threat actors and combined with data from other breaches. At the end of July, a threat actor leaked about data of 5.4 million Twitter accounts that were obtained by exploiting a now-fixed vulnerability in the popular social media platform. The threat actor offered for sale the stolen data on the popular hacking forum Breached forums. In January, a report published on Hacker claimed the discovery of the vulnerability that can be exploited by an attacker to find a Twitter account by the associated phone number, email, even if the user has opted to prevent this in the privacy options. The seller claimed that the database was contained data like emails, phone numbers of users ranging from celebrities to companies. The seller also shared a sample of data in the form of a CSV file. The vulnerability allows any party without any authentication to obtain a Twitter ID, which is also equal to getting the username of an account of any user by submitting a phone number or email, even though the user has prohibited this action in the privacy settings. The bug exists due to the process of authorization used in the Android client of Twitter, specifically in the process of checking the duplication of a Twitter account, reads the description in the report submitted by Ziranovsky via bug bounty platform HackerOne. This is a serious threat, as people can not only find users who have restricted the ability to be found by email and phone number, but any attacker with a basic knowledge of scripting coding can enumerate a big chunk of the Twitter user base unavailable to enumeration prior, create a database with phone number, email, username and connections. Such bases can be sold to malicious parties for advertising purposes or for the purposes of targeting celebrities and different malicious activities. In August, Twitter confirmed that the data breach was caused by the now-patched zero-day flaw submitted by researcher Ziranovsky via bug bounty platform HackerOne, and that he received a $5,040 bounty. Really? 5.4 million Twitter users were leaked, and the guy got $5,000. But anyway, we want to let you know about a vulnerability that allowed someone to enter a phone number or email address into login flow in the attempt to learn if that information was tied to an existing Twitter account, and if so, which specific account. Reads the Twitter advisory. In January 2022, we received a report through our bug bounty program of a vulnerability that allowed someone to identify the email or phone number associated with an account, or if they knew a person's email or phone number, they could identify their Twitter account if one existed, continues a social media firm. This bug resulted from an update to our code in June 2021. When we learned about this, we immediately investigated and fixed it. At that time, we had no evidence to suggest someone had taken advantage of the vulnerability. Well, now you do. China-linked UNC4191 app relies on USB devices in attacks against entities in the Philippines. Money researchers spotted an alleged China-linked cyber espionage group tracked as UNC4191, leveraging USB devices as attack vectors in campaigns aimed at Philippines entities. This campaign has been active as far back as September 2021 and targeted public and private sector entities primarily in Southeast Asia, along with organizations in the US, Europe, and Japan, I guess. UNC 4191 operations have affected a range of public and private sector entities, primarily in Southeast Asia and extending to the US, Europe, and I think that's Japan. I don't know. However, even when targeted organizations were based in other locations, the specific systems targeted by UNC 4191 were also found to be physically located in the Philippines. Reads the analysis published by Mondiat. The attackers leveraged legitimately signed binaries to sideload malware. Experts observed the use of 3 new families tracked by Mondiat as Mist Cloak, Dark Dew, and Blue Haze. The reported details of the above malware families were within the original article, I guess. The infection chain begins when a user plugs in a compromised removable device and manually executes a renamed signed binary from the root directory of the storage volume. The initial binaries named removable drive.exe or USB drive.exe are versions of a legitimately signed application called USB Network Gate, developed by the company Electronic Team Inc., continues the report. These are used to sideload the Mist Cloak malware that impersonates a legitimate DLL. Once the target system has been compromised, UNC419 deploys a renamed NCAT binary and executes a reverse shell to maintain a foothold in the infected system. The malicious code shows wormable capabilities and replicates by infecting new removable drives that are plugged into a compromised system. This means that the malicious payloads propagate to additional systems and potentially compromise air-gapped systems. Mondiat researchers observed threat actors enumerating domain trusts and querying domain and local group permissions in a time span of several minutes. We believe this activity showcases Chinese operations to gain and maintain access to public and private entities for the purposes of intelligence collection related to China's political and commercial interests. Our observations suggest that entities in the Philippines are the main target of this operation based on the number of affected systems located in this country that were identified by Mondiant, according to Mondiant. WhatsApp data leak 500 million user records for sale. Original posted by Cyber News. With that link there. On November 16th, an actor posted an ad on a well-known hacking community forum claiming they were selling a 2022 database of 487 million WhatsApp user mobile numbers. The dataset allegedly contains WhatsApp user data from 84 countries. Threat actors claim there are over 32 million US records included. Another huge chunk of phone numbers belonging to the citizens of Egypt, with 45 million, in Italy, 35 million, Saudi Arabia, 29 million, France, 20 million, and Turkey, 20 million. The dataset for sale also allegedly has nearly 10 million Russian and over 11 million UK citizens' phone numbers. Threat actors told Cyber News they were selling the US dataset for $7,000, the UK for $2,500, and Germany $2,000. Such information is mostly used by attackers for smishing and vishing attacks. So we recommend users to remain wary of any calls from unknown numbers, unsolicited calls, and messages. WhatsApp is reported to have more than 2 billion monthly active users globally. Black Basta seller of WhatsApp database shared a sample of data with Cyber News researchers. There were 1,097 UK, 817 US user numbers in the shared sample. Cyber News investigated all the numbers included in the sample and managed to confirm that all of them are, in fact, WhatsApp users. The seller did not specify how they obtained the database, suggesting they used their strategy to collect the data, and assured Cyber News all the numbers in the instance belong to active WhatsApp users. Cyber News reached out to WhatsApp parent company Meta, but received no immediate response. We will update the article, or they will update the article as soon as they learn more. The information on WhatsApp users could be obtained by harvesting information at scale, also known as scraping, which violates WhatsApp's terms of service. This claim is purely speculative, of course. However, quite often, massive data dumps posted online turn out to be obtained by scraping. Meta itself, long criticized for letting third parties scrape or collect user data, saw over 533 million user records leaked on a dark forum. The actor was sharing the dataset practically for free days after a massive Facebook data leak made the headlines. An archive containing data purportedly scraped from 500 million LinkedIn profiles had been put up for sale on a popular hacker forum. Leaked phone numbers could be used for marketing purposes, phishing, impersonation, and fraud. In this age, we all leave a sizable digital footprint, and tech giants like Meta should take all precautions and means to safeguard that data. Head of Cyber News Research team Montes Sasnowski said, "We should ask whether an added clause of scraping or platform abuse is not permitted in the terms and conditions is enough. Threat actors don't care about those terms, so companies should take rigorous steps to mitigate threats and prevent platform abuse from a technical standpoint." Hey, we now move on to other security news. 5 API vulnerabilities that get exploited by criminals. It's no secret that cybersecurity has become a leading priority for most organizations, especially those in industries that handle sensitive customer information. And as these businesses work towards building robust security strategies, it's vital that they account for various threat actors and vulnerabilities. One area that requires significant scrutiny is API security. API, short for Application Programming Interfaces, have become a common building block for digitally enabled organizations. They facilitate communication as well as critical business operations, and they also support important digital transformations. It's no surprise, then, that the average number of APIs per company increased 221% in the last year. Crafting an API security strategy is a complex task. APIs have unique threat implications that aren't fully solved by web application firewalls or identity and access management solutions. The first step to getting it right is to understand what the common vulnerabilities are. In its API Security Top 10, the Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, identifies these top 10 threats to APIs. So, I took a closer look at some of the most common. APIs with broken object-level authentication allow attackers to easily exploit API endpoints by manipulating the ID of an object sent within an API request. The result, BOLA authorization flows can lead to unauthorized viewing, modification, or destruction of data, or even a full account takeover. Today, BOLA accounts for 40% of all API attacks. one of the primary reasons they're so prevalent is that traditional security controls like WAFs or API gateways can't identify them as anomalous to the baseline API behavior. Instead, businesses need an API solution that can spot when an authenticated user is trying to gain unauthorized access to another user's data. There are a number of factors that can lead to broken user authentication in an API. This includes weak password complexity or poor password hygiene, missing account lockout thresholds, long durations for password or certificate rotations, or relying on API keys alone for authentication. When an API experiences broken user authentication, cybercriminals can use authentication-related attacks like credential stuffing and brute force attacks to gain access to applications. Once they're in, the attackers can then take over user accounts, manipulate data, or make unauthorized transactions. So when it comes to traditional security methods, they often lack the ability to track traffic over time, meaning they can't easily identify high-volume attacks like credential stuffing. As such, an API security solution should be able to identify abnormal behavior against a typical authentication sequence. So 2 Estonian citizens arrested in the 575 million cryptocurrency fraud scheme. 2 Estonian nationals were arrested in Tallinn, Estonia, after being indicted in the U.S. for running a fraudulent cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme that caused more than $575 million in losses. According to the indictment, Sergei Potapenko and Ivan Turgin, I guess it is, both 37, allegedly defrauded hundreds of thousands of victims through a crypto Ponzi scheme. The duo used shell companies to launder the cash from the fraudulent activity and to buy real estate and luxury cars. What they always do. They induced victims to enter into fraudulent equipment rental contracts with the defendant's cryptocurrency mining service called Hashflare. They also caused victims to invest in a virtual currency bank called Polybius Bank, reads the press release published by the DOJ. In reality, Polybius was never actually a bank and never paid out the promised dividends. Victims paid more than $575 million to Potapenko and Turgin's companies. The defendants are accused to have defrauded the victims between December 2013 and August 2019. They operated with other co-conspirators residing in Estonia, Belarus, and Switzerland. Potapenko and Turgin tricked the investors into believing that Hashflare was a massive cryptocurrency mining operation. The victims were requested to pay for rent computing power and receive a proportional part of the cryptocurrencies mined. The bad news for the investors is that Hashflare did not have the virtual currency mining equipment it claimed to have. According to the indictment, Hashflare's equipment performed Bitcoin mining at a rate of less than 1% of the computing power it claimed to have. When investors asked to withdraw their mining proceeds, the defendants either resisted making the payments, or in some cases, they paid off the investors using virtual currency that were purchased on the open market. Hashflare shut down its operations in 2019, but since May 2017, the duo started offering investments in a company called Polybius, which they claimed to form a bank specializing in virtual currency. They promised to pay investors dividends from Polybius profits. The men raised at least $25 million in this scheme and transferred most of the money to other bank accounts and virtual currency wallets they controlled. Polybius never formed a bank or paid any dividends, continues the DOJ. According to the indictment, the defendants also conspired to launder their criminal proceeds through shell companies and phony contracts and invoices. The money laundering conspiracy involved at least 75 real estate properties, or real properties, 6 luxury vehicles, cryptocurrency wallets, and thousands of cryptocurrency mining machines. Potapenko and Turgin are being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 16 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. Both could face a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. U.S. FCC bans import of electronic equipment from Chinese firms. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission announced the total ban of telecom and surveillance equipment from Chinese companies Huawei, ZTE, Hytera, Hikvision, and Dahua due to an unacceptable national security threat. The U.S. government has already added the companies to the covered list, and the new rules aim at protecting the Americans from national security threats involving telecommunications. The Federal Communications Commission adopted new rules prohibiting telecommunications equipment deemed to pose an unacceptable risk to national security from being authorized for importation or sale in the United States. This is the latest step by the Commission to protect our nation's communications networks, reads the announcement published by the FCC. In recent years, the Commission, Congress, and the executive branch have taken multiple actions to build a more secure and resilient supply chain for communications equipment and services within the United States. The FCC is committed to protecting our national security by ensuring that untrustworthy communications equipment is not authorized for use within our borders, and we're continuing that work here, said Chairwoman Jessica Rosenwortzel. These new rules are an important part of our ongoing actions to protect the American people from national security threats involving telecommunications. The new rules implement the Directive in Secure Equipment Act of 2021, which was signed by President Biden in November. Chinese firms Hytera, Hikvision, and Dahua have to provide details about the safeguards they have implemented on the sale of their devices for government use and the surveillance of critical infrastructure facilities. In September, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission has added Pacific Network Corp, ComNet, LLC, and China Unicorn Operations Limited to the covered list. The FCC explained that the above companies are subject to the exploitation, influence, and control of the Chinese government and the national security risks associated with such exploitation, influence, and control. This week, the British government ordered its departments to stop installing Chinese security cameras at sensitive buildings due to security risks. The government has ordered departments to disconnect the camera from core networks and to consider removing them. The risk is related to the use of security cameras manufactured by Chinese-owned companies Dahua and Hikvision. Tips for gaming your cybersecurity awareness training program. According to one report, 82% of data breaches involve the human element, from social attacks to misuse of technologies. These errors are not always entirely preventable, as some level of human error is inevitable, but proper training in cybersecurity awareness can greatly decrease the likelihood of human mistakes, leading to data breaches. Due to the increasing use of digital tools for business operations and reliance on employee conduct to ensure security, new solutions are required. While cybersecurity awareness training can take many forms, most training programs are computer-based. It's important when developing and implementing these programs to be aware of what methods of education work best. This training must reach users who may not have any background or knowledge in cybersecurity, and it must be effective enough to ensure that security is not only top of mind, but a fluent language. In service of that end, gamification is a highly effective tactic. There are many benefits to gamifying your approach to cybersecurity awareness training, all of which contribute to the goal of educating employees and decreasing risk. Gamification incentivizes and motivates employees to be more engaged, participate more actively, retain information, and implement behavioral changes moving forward. There are 5 tips that gamify cybersecurity awareness training program. One of the most basic elements of gamification is use of visual aids. Visual aids such as graphs, charts, pictures, or videos are a quick and efficient way to convey information that might be harder to understand in text format. Statistics and numerical data are easily transferable into a visual format, and other information can also be translated into this context. These visual aids can help to keep employees engaged with the content by breaking up what could otherwise be a monotonous block of text. They are also often more easily remembered. Offering rewards for completion or performance is an incredible motivator. So what they're basically saying is my dailies, at least how I present my dailies, may be a very good way for you or your employees or your coworkers to learn about cybersecurity, because I try to add a little fun there, some jokes, some comics, whatever. Now, whether the rewards are simply in-game points or real-life prizes like gift cards, which I do not give with my dailies, the possibility of receiving something back for their hard work is a good incentive for employees to not only do the training, but pay attention and perform well. While there have previously been policies in place to administer consequences to employees who do not adhere to security measures, the implementation of a positive repercussion is just as important as ensuring maximum retention and compliance. Multiple results can be achieved with one simple tool in their form of quizzes. Quizzing employees on their training necessitates them paying attention to the training and retaining information that is vital for cybersecurity. It also presents them with a situation where their performance determines their score, and performing well on a quiz might earn them a reward. If quizzes are leveraged for healthy, competitive competition, employees can be even more motivated to do well. But my theory is adding multiple levels of fun, information, and retention, reading, listening, and viewing, you don't necessarily need the reward of a prize. But judging by the number of views my videos get, I could be wrong. Whatever. Next one. Irish Data Protection Commission finds Meta over 2021 data scraping leak. So Meta has been fined $265 million euro or $275 million by the Irish Data Protection Commission for data leaks suffered by Facebook in 2021 that exposed the data belonging to millions of Facebook users. The Data Protection Commission is also imposing a range of corrective measures on Meta. The Data Protection Commission has announced the conclusion of an inquiry into Meta Platforms' Ireland Limited data controller of the Facebook social media network, imposing a fine of €265 million and a range of corrective measures, reads the DPC's press release. On April 3rd, 2021, a user leaked the phone numbers and personal data of 533 million Facebook users in a hacking forum for free online, which was part of a previous article we read maybe 10 minutes ago. The availability of the data was first reported by Alon Gal, CTO of cyber intelligence firm Hudson Rock. The data of the Facebook users from 106 countries were available for free, with over 32 million records belonging to users from the US, 11 million from the UK, 6 million from India. Leaked data included users' phone numbers, Facebook IDs, full names, locations, birthdays, bios, and for some accounts, the associated email addresses. Immediately after the disclosures of the data leak, the Irish DPC launched an investigation of potential GDPR violations by Meta. The data were amassed by threat actors by exploiting a vulnerability fixed in 2019 that allowed data scraping from the social network. The company at the time, known as Facebook, said the data had been gathered by what it said were malicious actors who misused a Facebook tool called Contact Importer to upload a large volume of phone numbers to see which ones matched the service's users, the reported the Wall Street Journal. The company reiterated that it had removed the ability to use phone numbers to scrape its services. In this way, in 2019, now DPC concluded the investigation and argued that Meta violated the GDPR for not implementing appropriate technical and organizational measures and not adopting the necessary safeguards as required by the European regulation. The decision, which was adopted on Friday, 25th of November 2022, records findings of infringement of Articles 25.1 and 25.2 of GDPR. The decision imposed a reprimand and an order requiring MPIL to bring its processing into compliance by taking a range of specified remedial actions within a particular time frame, continues the press release. Meta declared that it has made multiple changes to better safeguard users' data since the incident took place. The Irish privacy regulator revealed it has several dozen more ongoing cases involving multiple tech giants, so look out. Google won a lawsuit against the Glupteba botnet operators. Last week, Google announced it has won a nearly year-long legal battle against the Glupteba botnet. Glupteba is a highly sophisticated botnet composed of millions of compromised Windows devices. Unlike other botnets, Glupteba leverages cryptocurrency blockchains as a command and control mechanism in an attempt to make it more resilient to takeover. This means that a conventional botnet can be disabled by taking the server at the hard-coded address offline. The Glupteba malware, however, instructs infected computers to look for the addresses of its command and control servers by referencing transactions associated with specific accounts on the Bitcoin blockchain. The blockchain is not controlled by any central authority, and each transaction is disseminated to and viewable by any user on the blockchain, states the court owner. These features make the Glupteba botnet unusually resistant to disruption. If the botnet's command and control servers are disabled, then its operators can simply set up new servers and broadcast new addresses on the blockchain. The IT giant won a lawsuit filed against 2 Russian nationals involved in the operations of the botnet. The court's ruling sets an important legal precedent in the fight against cybercrime. In December 2021, the company's threat analysis group shared the actions it took to disrupt the operations of the Glupteba botnet and announced it has filed a case in the Southern District of New York against its operators. Last week, they were pleased to see the end to a nearly 2-year-long legal battle against the Glupteba botnet, reads the announcement published by Google. They made the explicit decision to name the criminal actors behind Glupteba as defendants in the suit to expose them and their various shell companies. It was not a common tactic, but Google felt, the threat group at Google felt it was important to try and disrupt their ability to operate covertly online. The U.S. District Court issued monetary sanctions against both the Russian-based defendants and their U.S.-based lawyer and required them to pay the legal fees to Google. In exchange, the defendants would receive Google's agreement not to report them to law enforcement and a payment of $1 million per defendant, plus $110,000 in attorney's fees. The defendants stated that, although they do not currently have access to private keys, Valtron would be willing to provide them with the private keys if the case were settled, continues the court order. The sentence is considered very important and demonstrates that crooks can have monetary consequences for engaging in cyber criminal activities like this one. It is now clear that the defendants appeared in this court not to proceed in good faith, but to defend against Google's claims, but with the intent to abuse the court system and discovery rules to reap a profit from Google, said federal judge Denise Cote in her decision Tuesday. UK urges to disconnect Chinese cameras in government buildings. This is very similar to the US. Reuters reports that the British government ordered its departments to stop installing Chinese security cameras at sensitive buildings due to security risks. The government has ordered departments to disconnect the camera from core networks and consider removing them. The decision comes after a review of current and future possible security risks associated with the installation of visual surveillance systems on the government estate. Cabinet Office Minister Oliver Dowden said in a written statement to Parliament. States, according to Reuters, the security cameras of the two Chinese firms are widely adopted by a number of government departments, including the Interior and Business Ministries. Dowden pointed out that the surveillance cameras must be carefully scrutinized because of their capability and connectivity of these systems. The review has concluded that in the light of the threat to the UK and the increasing capability and connectivity of these systems, additional controls are required, Dowden said. Departments have therefore been instructed to cease deployment of such equipment onto sensitive sites where it is produced by companies subject to the National Intelligence Law of the People's Republic of China. The risk is related to the use of security cameras manufactured by Chinese-owned companies Dahua and Hikvision. Again, what we heard from the U.S. Both companies are also on the covered list maintained by the U.S. Federal Communications Commission. The covered list published by Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau The covered list published by Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau included products and services that could pose an unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. So that's related to the United States, but UK has the same. CISA adds Oracle Fusion middleware Flaw to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, a critical vulnerability impacting Oracle Fusion middleware, tracked as CVE 2021-35587 with a CVSS score of 3.1. CVS's 3.1 base score of 9.8 to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. An unauthenticated attacker with network access via HTTP can exploit the vulnerability to compromise Oracle Access Manager. Easily exploitable vulnerability allows unauthenticated attacker with network access via HTTP to compromise Oracle Access Manager. Successful attacks of this vulnerability can result in takeover of Oracle Access Manager. Again, the CVS's version 3.1 base score of 9.8 it comes in the statement from the NIST. The flaw was reported in March and affects versions 11.1.2.3, 12.2.1.3.0, and 12.2.1.4.0. The IT giant fixed the issue in January with the release of the critical patch update. This vulnerability was discovered by accident by whoever the me is, and Peter Jalson. It's not me, it's whoever wrote me, while we were analyzing and building POC for another mega zero day, which is still not fixed by now. Reads the post published by security researcher Nguyen Yang. Okay, so Nguyen Yang here is the me, who reported the flaw alongside Peter Jason. It's quite easy to access the entry point and exploit the vulnerability, so it's recommended to apply the patch now. It may give the attacker access to OAM's server to create any user with any privileges or just get code execution in the victim server. CISA orders federal agencies to fix these vulnerabilities by December 19th, 2022. International Police Operation dismantled spoofing service, iSpoof, an international law enforcement operation that was conducted by authorities in Europe, Australia, and the United States, and Ukraine, and Canada, with the support of Europol, has dismantled online phone number spoofing service called iSpoof. The iSpoof service allowed fraudsters to impersonate trusted corporations or contacts in an attempt to gain access to sensitive information from victims. Threat actors used the service to trick victims into disclosing financial or private information or transferring money. The services of the website allowed those who sign up and pay for the service to anonymously make spoofed calls, send recorded messages, and intercept one-time passwords, reads the announcement published by Europol. The users were able to impersonate an infinite number of entities, such as banks, retail companies, and government institutions, for financial gain and substantial losses to victims. The spoofing service is believed to have caused an estimated worldwide loss in excess of 100 million British pounds, or 115 million euros, according to the police. Some victims have seen their savings or pension pot disappeared within hours, reported the Dutch police. The investigation, dubbed Operation Elaborate, was launched in October 2021 at the request of the UK authorities. The iSpoof was launched in December 2020, and authorities estimated it had 59,000 users. Exploitation of the technology by organized criminals is one of the greatest challenges for law enforcement in the 21st century. Together with the support of partners across UK, policing, and internationally, we are reinventing the way fraud is investigated. The MET is targeting the criminals at the center of this illicit web that cause misery to thousands or hundreds of thousands. London's Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley stated, "By taking away the tools and systems that have enabled fraudsters to cheat innocent people at scale, this operation shows how we are determined to target corrupt individuals intent on exploiting often vulnerable people." In the coordinated effort led by the United Kingdom, 142 suspects had been arrested, including an administrator of iSpoof website and iSpoof.me and iSpoof.cc. The police seized the servers behind the servers, and 2 days later, Ukrainian and U.S. agencies took them offline. The arrests today send a message to cybercriminals that they can no longer hide behind perceived international anonymity. Europol coordinated the law enforcement community, enriched the information picture, and brought criminal intelligence into ongoing operations to target the criminals wherever they are located. Europol's executive director, Ms. Catherine de Bolle, said, "Together with our international partners, we will continue to relentlessly push the envelope to bring criminals to justice." 3 of the worst data breaches in the world that could have been prevented. So data breaches can be devastating for organizations and even entire countries. Eliminating the risk of a data breach is nearly impossible, but some things can be done to reduce it significantly. There are 3 of the worst data breaches that could have been avoided. In 2013, Yahoo suffered one of the worst data breaches in history, exposing over 3 billion user accounts. The breach was unveiled 3 years later during the process where Verizon was acquiring Yahoo. Yahoo initially reported that 1 billion users had been affected, but the number turned out to be much higher. The attack and lack of transparency from Yahoo reduced the price Verizon had to pay for the acquisition. While no plaintext passwords or financial data was stolen, the hack did expose answers to security questions. This allowed hackers to breach many user accounts. Experts believe Yahoo was using outdated, easy-to-crack encryption, which led to the attack. The attack is a good reminder of how critical strong encryption is in protecting your website users. This attack could have easily been avoided if Yahoo had invested more in the security infrastructure. In February 2021, several U.S. government agencies and large organizations were hit by cyber attacks due to a vulnerability in their IT infrastructure provider, SolarWinds. Many government agencies and Fortune 500 companies use SolarWinds, which contribute to the severity of the attack. Because of SolarWinds' deep integration with other software solutions, organizations were forced to continue working with it despite knowing that a breach had occurred. SolarWinds employees claimed that the attack resulted from a weak password that an intern had used, SolarWinds 123. The attack affected thousands of SolarWinds clients, causing billions in damages. All of that could have been avoided had SolarWinds implemented a strong password policy. Weak passwords are the easiest way hackers can hack into a system. Organizations must have a robust password policy. One way to help enforce such a policy is by providing employees with a password manager for easy password generation and storage. Near the holiday season of 2013, hackers exposed the credit card and debit card information of over 110 million Target customers. Because it was impossible to recover the data, Target had to pay tens of millions in damages to affected customers. The attack happened around Black Friday, which was particularly bad for business due to the bad publicity. The hackers used social engineering techniques, sending phishing emails to several of Target's vendors and successfully breaching Target's network. They then installed malware, which helped them obtain customers' credit card information. And that's the news. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe if you haven't already, and smash the bell if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.